Maya stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her small attic room. At 22, she had learned to avoid mirrors most of the time. They only reminded her of what everyone else seemed to notice first about her. Her stepmother's voice echoed up the stairs, sharp and demanding as always. "Maya, get down here this instant." She sighed and made her way down the narrow staircase of the grand house that had once belonged to her father. 3 years had passed since his death, and each day felt longer than the last. The house still looked the same from the outside, with its tall windows and perfectly manicured gardens. But inside, everything had changed. Her stepmother Victoria sat in the expensive leather chair that used to be her father's favorite spot. Victoria's 2 daughters, Luna and Grace, lounged on the sofa nearby, both scrolling through their phones with bored expressions. Maya had grown up with these girls, but they had never treated her like a real sister. If anything, her father's death had made things worse between them. "Sit down," Victoria said without looking up from the papers spread across the coffee table. "We need to discuss your future." Maya's stomach twisted. Conversations about her future never went well in this house. She perched on the edge of a chair, keeping her hands folded in her lap. "You're 22 years old," Victoria continued, finally looking at her with those cold gray eyes. "Most girls your age are married by now, or at least engaged, but you—" She gestured vaguely in Maya's direction. "You haven't even had a proper boyfriend." Luna snorted from the sofa. "Can you blame the guys? I mean, look at her." "Luna, enough," Victoria said, but there was no real scolding in her voice. "The point is, Maya, you're becoming a burden on this family. This house costs money to maintain. Your food, your clothes, everything costs money. And what do you contribute?" Maya felt her cheeks burn. She had tried to get jobs before, but Victoria always found reasons why she couldn't take them. Too far away, wrong hours, not suitable for a girl from their family. Maya had begun to suspect that Victoria didn't want her to have any independence at all. "I've been thinking about this problem for months," Victoria went on, "and I believe I've found a solution that will benefit everyone." She picked up one of the papers from the table. Maya could see it was some kind of letter, written in neat handwriting. "I've been in contact with a man named Thomas Walsh. He owns a small farm about 3 hours from here in the countryside. He's looking for a wife." Maya's heart started beating faster. "A wife?" "Yes. He's 31 years old, never been married, and he needs someone to help him with his farm work. It's not an easy life, Maya. Farm work is hard, dirty work. The house is small and old. There's no shopping mall nearby, no fancy restaurants, just fields and animals and hard work from sunrise to sunset." Grace looked up from her phone for the first time. "Sounds awful. Perfect for Maya, though." Victoria smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "I thought so, too. Mr. Walsh isn't wealthy, Maya. He can barely afford to keep his farm running, but he's willing to take you as his wife, even though—" She paused, looking Maya up and down. "Even though you're not exactly what most men would choose." The words hit Maya like physical blows. She had heard similar things from Victoria and her daughters before, but somehow this felt worse. This felt final. "You want me to marry a stranger?" Maya asked quietly. "I want you to finally become useful," Victoria snapped. "Do you think your father would be proud of what you've become? A lazy girl who sits around eating our food and taking up space? At least on a farm, you'll have to work for your keep." Maya thought about her father, kind and gentle, who had always told her she was perfect just the way she was. He would have hated hearing Victoria talk to her like this, but he wasn't here anymore to protect her. "What if I say no?" Victoria's expression turned dangerous. "Then you can pack your bags and leave today, with nothing. No money, no clothes except what you're wearing, and certainly no share of your father's inheritance. You see, Maya, your father's will was very specific. You only inherit anything if you're married before your 25th birthday. If you're not married by then, everything goes to Luna and Grace." Maya felt the world spinning around her. She had never known about this condition in her father's will. Had he really written that? Or had Victoria somehow arranged it? "So you have a choice," Victoria continued. Marry this farmer and at least have a roof over your head, or leave here with nothing and see how far you get on your own. With your limitations, I don't think you'll find many other options. Luna and Grace were both watching now, smirking like they were enjoying a good show. Maya realized that this had all been planned out carefully. Victoria had probably been working on this for months, maybe even longer. When? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tomorrow. Mr. Walsh is expecting you. I've already told him you've agreed. Tomorrow, but I haven't even met him. You'll meet him when you get there. He's sending someone to pick you up at 10 in the morning. I suggest you pack tonight. Maya sat there for a moment, trying to process what was happening. Her whole life was being decided for her just like that. She was being shipped off to some stranger like a piece of unwanted furniture. Can I at least know something about him? She asked. Victoria glanced at the letter again. He's quiet, works hard, doesn't drink or smoke. He lives alone on his farm. That's all you need to know. And he really wants to marry me? Just like that? Let's just say he's not in a position to be picky, Grace said with a laugh. Victoria shot her daughter a warning look, but the damage was done. Maya understood perfectly. This Thomas Walsh must be desperate if he was willing to marry someone he'd never met, especially someone like her. That night, Maya packed her few belongings into 2 small suitcases. Most of her clothes were old and worn, but they were all she had. She folded each item carefully, wondering if she would ever see this room again. Probably not, and maybe that was for the best. As she packed, she found an old photo of her and her father taken just a year before he died. They were both smiling, standing in front of his favorite rose bush in the garden. He had his arm around her shoulders, and she could almost hear his voice telling her how proud he was of her. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered to the photo. I don't think this is what you wanted for me, but what choice did she have? Victoria was right about one thing. Maya had no job, no money, and no real friends who could help her. Her father's family lived far away and had never shown much interest in her. Victoria's family had made it clear she wasn't welcome. Maybe this Thomas Walsh would be kind to her. Maybe farm life wouldn't be as bad as Victoria made it sound. Maybe, for once in her life, someone would see her as more than just a burden to be gotten rid of. Maya fell asleep that night holding her father's photo, trying not to think about how scared she was about what tomorrow would bring. The old pickup truck bounced along the dirt road, and Maya gripped the door handle to keep from sliding around on the worn seat. The driver, a cheerful middle-aged man named Pete, had been talking nonstop for the past hour about the weather, the crops, and how excited everyone was that Thomas was finally getting married. Been waiting a long time for this day, Pete said, with a grin. Thomas is a good man, works harder than anyone I know. You're lucky to be marrying him. Maya nodded politely, though she didn't feel lucky at all. She felt terrified. Her 2 suitcases sat in the truck bed, bouncing around with every bump in the road. Everything she owned in the world was in those 2 cases. How much further? She asked, watching endless fields roll by outside the window. Just a few more minutes now. You can see Thomas's land starting right about here. Maya looked out at the fields Pete was pointing to. They stretched as far as she could see, filled with healthy-looking crops she couldn't identify. For supposedly poor farmland, it looked pretty good to her. But then again, what did she know about farming? The truck turned onto a smaller road and Maya saw a large wooden sign that read, Walsh Family Farm, Estender 1892. The road was well maintained, not the muddy track she had expected. Tall trees lined both sides, creating a tunnel of green shade. Here, we are, Pete announced as they rounded a bend. Maya's first glimpse of her new home surprised her. She had pictured a run-down shack with peeling paint and a sagging roof. Instead, she saw a 2-story farmhouse that looked old but well cared for. The white paint was fresh, the wraparound porch was sturdy, and flowers bloomed in neat beds along the front. A man stepped out onto the porch as the truck pulled up. Maya's breath caught in her throat. This was Thomas Walsh. He was tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair and kind brown eyes. He wore simple jeans and a blue work shirt, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. He wasn't handsome in the way movie stars were handsome, but there was something solid and reassuring about him. Maya suddenly felt very aware of how she looked after the long drive. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair was messy, and she probably smelled like the truck's old upholstery. Thomas walked over as Pete shut off the engine. "You must be Maya," he said, and his voice was warm and gentle. "Welcome home." Home. Maya tried to remember the last time anyone had called anywhere her home. Pete hopped out and started unloading her suitcases. "I'll just put these on the porch and let you two get acquainted," he said with a wink. Maya climbed down from the truck carefully. Her legs felt shaky and she wasn't sure if it was from the long ride or her nerves. "Thank you for coming," Thomas said simply. "I know this situation isn't exactly normal. Would you like to see the house?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Thomas picked up her suitcases like they weighed nothing and led her up the porch steps. The front door opened into a living room that was clean and comfortable, with a big stone fireplace and furniture that looked handmade but sturdy. "The kitchen's through here," Thomas said, leading her down a short hallway. "I hope you don't mind, but I made lunch. Figured you'd be hungry after the drive." The kitchen was bigger than Maya had expected, with a large wooden table and modern appliances that looked fairly new. A pot of something that smelled amazing was simmering on the stove. "You cook?" Maya asked, surprised. Thomas smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Had to learn when my parents passed away. Can't live on sandwiches forever." He ladled soup into 2 bowls and set them on the table along with thick slices of homemade bread. Maya sat down carefully, still feeling like she was in a dream. "This is really good," she said after tasting the soup. And it was. Better than most of the meals Victoria's cook had made. "My grandmother's recipe," Thomas said. "She taught me to cook when I was little. Said every person should know how to feed themselves properly." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Maya kept stealing glances at Thomas, trying to figure him out. He didn't seem like the desperate, rough farmer Victoria had described. He had good manners, he was clean, and he seemed genuinely nice. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said finally. "Of course. Why did you agree to this, to marrying someone you'd never met?" Thomas set down his spoon and looked at her thoughtfully. "I could ask you the same question." Maya felt her cheeks get hot. "I didn't have much choice." "Neither did I, in a way," Thomas said quietly. "This farm is a lot of work for one person, and I've been alone here for 3 years now. Gets lonely sometimes, but why me? I mean," she gestured at herself helplessly. Thomas frowned. "What do you mean?" "Come on, look at me. I'm not exactly what most men would choose for a wife." The frown deepened. "Who told you that?" "Everyone. My stepmother, her daughters, people at school, when I was younger. I'm fat, Thomas. I'm not pretty or charming or any of the things men usually want." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Maya, I don't know what kind of people you've been around, but they were wrong. Dead wrong." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She looked down at her soup bowl, blinking hard. "Hey," Thomas said gently. "Look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I don't care what anyone else told you. I can see with my own eyes that you're a good person. That's what matters to me." After lunch, Thomas showed her around the rest of the house. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs, and he had prepared the largest one for her. "I figured you'd want your own space while we get to know each other," he said. "No pressure about anything else." Maya felt a wave of relief. She had been dreading that part of being married to a stranger. Her room was simple but comfortable, with a big window that looked out over the fields. Thomas had put fresh flowers on the dresser and new towels on the bed. "Thank you," Maya said. "This is really nice. I'll let you get settled. Take your time. When you're ready, I can show you around the farm." An hour later, Maya had unpacked her few belongings and changed into her most practical clothes. She found Thomas in the barn, checking on a group of cows that looked healthy and well-fed. "These are beautiful animals," Maya said, genuinely impressed. "Thanks, I take pride in keeping them healthy. Happy cows give better milk." As they walked around the farm, Maya noticed things that didn't quite add up. The equipment in the barns looked new and expensive. The fences were all in perfect repair. The fields stretched much farther than she had realized at first. "How big is your farm?" she asked. "Oh, this section is about 400 acres, Thomas said casually. 400 acres? Maya didn't know much about farming, but that sounded like a lot for a poor farmer. They were walking past another barn when Maya heard Thomas's phone ring. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Sorry, I need to take this," he said. "Work stuff." He walked a few steps away, but Maya could still hear parts of the conversation. "Can't do the inspection until next week. Tell them the Johnson contract is fine as written. No, keep the Chicago office updated." Chicago office? Maya felt confused. What kind of farm business had offices in Chicago? When Thomas finished the call, he looked slightly uncomfortable. "Everything okay?" Maya asked. "Yeah, just some business with the feed suppliers," he said quickly. "Nothing important." But Maya had the feeling it was more important than he was letting on. That evening, Thomas cooked dinner again, and they sat on the front porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Maya had never seen such a beautiful sunset in the city. "It's peaceful here," she said. "I've always thought so. Sometimes I go weeks without seeing another person besides the workers." "Workers?" "Yeah, I have a few guys who help with the heavy work during planting and harvest seasons. Can't do it all myself." Another piece of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. Poor farmers usually couldn't afford to hire help. As the days went by, Maya found herself settling into a routine. Thomas treated her with more kindness and respect than she had received in years. He never made jokes about her weight or appearance. He listened when she talked and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. But she also noticed more things that made her wonder about Thomas's true situation. Expensive-looking vehicles occasionally drove up to the house for meetings that Thomas always took in his office with the door closed. He received a lot of mail that looked like business correspondence. And sometimes, late at night, she could hear him on long phone calls that sounded very much like business meetings. Maya was starting to suspect that there was much more to Thomas Walsh than met the eye, but she had no idea just how much more. 3. Weeks had passed since Maya arrived at the farm, and she was starting to feel like she actually belonged somewhere for the first time in years. Each morning she woke up to the sound of roosters crowing instead of car horns and sirens. The quiet was something she was still getting used to, but she found she loved it. Thomas had been patient with her, never pushing her to do more than she felt comfortable with. At first she had just helped with simple tasks like feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, but gradually she found herself wanting to do more. "I think there might be a problem with the irrigation system in the south field," Maya said one morning over breakfast. She had been walking around the farm early, something that had become her daily habit. Thomas looked up from his coffee, surprised. "What makes you think that?" "The plants in that section look different. Not as green as the others. And I noticed the soil feels drier there even though it rained 2 days ago." Thomas set down his cup and studied her face. "You're right. I've been wondering about that myself, but hadn't had time to check it properly. Want to come take a look?" "With me?" They walked out to the south field together and Maya pointed out exactly what she had noticed. Thomas knelt down and tested the soil himself, then checked the irrigation lines. "You're absolutely right," he said, sounding impressed. "This line is clogged, has been for probably a week. I can't believe you spotted this so quickly." Maya felt a warm glow of pride. "I just notice things, I guess." "You do more than notice things. You understand what you're seeing. That's not common." Over the next few days, Thomas started asking Maya's opinion about other aspects of the farm. She found herself suggesting small changes that made big differences, like rearranging the feed schedule for the cows to help them produce more milk, or adjusting the spacing between plants in the vegetable garden to reduce competition for nutrients. "Where did you learn all this?" Thomas asked one afternoon as they watched the cows, who were noticeably happier and healthier, since Maya had suggested changes to their routine. "I don't know," Maya said honestly. I used to read a lot when I was younger, science books mostly. My father had a big library and I spent most of my time there. I guess some of it stuck. Your stepmother never mentioned that you were interested in science. Maya's expression darkened slightly. Victoria didn't think it was important. She said reading too much made girls unmarriageable. Thomas shook his head. Victoria sounds like a piece of work. That was the strongest criticism Maya had ever heard Thomas make about anyone, and it made her smile. As the days went on, Maya's confidence grew. She started suggesting bigger changes, like rotating crops in certain fields to improve soil health, or building better ventilation in the chicken coops to reduce disease. Thomas not only listened to her ideas, but started implementing them. "I want to show you something?" Thomas said one morning, leading her to his office in the house. Maya had never been in this room before. It was clearly a working office with filing cabinets, a computer, and papers scattered across a large desk. "These are the productivity reports for the past month," Thomas said, pointing to a chart on his computer screen. "Look at this." Maya studied the numbers. Even though she had never seen farm reports before, the trend was clear. Everything's going up. Way up. Milk production is up 20%. Crop yields are up 50% in the fields where we implemented your suggestions. And the chickens are laying more eggs than they have in years. Maya stared at the screen, hardly believing what she was seeing. "I did that? You did that? Maya, in 3 weeks, you've improved this farm's performance more than I managed to do in the past year." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but these were good tears. Happy tears. "Really? Really? I think you have a gift for this." That afternoon, Thomas took Maya into town for the first time since she had arrived. The small farming community was exactly what Maya had expected. One main street with a few shops, a diner, and a post office. Everyone seemed to know Thomas, and Maya noticed how people treated him with a lot of respect. "Thomas," called an older woman from outside the grocery store. "Is this your new wife we've been hearing about?" "This is Maya," Thomas said with a smile. "Maya, this is Mrs. Patterson. She runs the grocery store." Mrs. Patterson looked Maya up and down, but not in the mean way Maya was used to, more like she was taking her measure. "Heard you've been helping Thomas with the farm," Mrs. Patterson said. "That's good. Man needs a partner, not just a pretty face." Maya felt herself blushing. "I'm just trying to help where I can. Don't be modest, dear. Word gets around fast in a small town. Folks are saying Thomas's farm is doing better than ever since you arrived." They continued down the street, and Maya was surprised by how many people stopped to talk to them. Everyone was friendly, and several people mentioned that they had heard good things about the improvements at the farm. "How does everyone know so much about what we're doing?" Maya asked Thomas as they walked back to the truck. Thomas looked slightly uncomfortable. Small town. People talk. But Maya was starting to think there was more to it than that. That evening, Maya decided to cook dinner for the first time. She wasn't a great cook, but she wanted to do something nice for Thomas after all his kindness. She made a simple pasta dish with vegetables from the garden. "This is delicious," Thomas said, and he sounded like he meant it. "It's nothing fancy. It doesn't need to be fancy. It's made with care. That's what matters." After dinner, they sat on the porch as they had gotten into the habit of doing. Maya had been thinking about something all day. "Thomas, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Why aren't you married already? I mean, you're a good man. You're kind. You work hard. You're not bad looking. Why were you willing to marry a complete stranger?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the fields. "I told you my parents died 3 years ago. Yes. What I didn't tell you is how hard it was to keep the farm going after that. Not just the work, but the business side of things. I was so focused on just surviving that I never took time to meet anyone." And then he paused. "And then I realized I was 31 years old and completely alone." Maya felt her heart ache for him. "That must have been really hard." "It was. When your stepmother contacted me about you, I'll admit I was desperate enough to consider almost anything. But then she told me about your situation and I thought maybe we could help each other. What did she tell you about my situation? Thomas turned to look at her directly. She said you were unhappy living with them, that you felt like you didn't fit in with their lifestyle. She made it sound like you wanted a different kind of life. Maya felt a surge of anger. Even when arranging to get rid of her, Victoria had lied. She didn't mention that she was getting rid of me because she thought I was fat and unmarriageable. Thomas's expression hardened. She absolutely did not mention that. If she had, I would have told her exactly what I thought of her opinion. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. For what it's worth, Thomas said eventually, I'm glad you're here. These past few weeks have been the best I've had in years. Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Really? Really? You've brought something to this place that was missing. Not just your ideas about the farm, though those have been amazing. You've brought life back to this house. Maya looked out at the fields that were starting to feel like home. For the first time in her adult life, she felt truly useful. More than useful. She felt valued. I'm glad I'm here too, she said softly. As they sat there in the gathering darkness, Maya noticed something she had seen several times before but never really thought about. In the distance, she could see lights from what looked like other buildings on the property, but Thomas had never mentioned any other buildings. Thomas, what are those lights over there? Thomas followed her gaze and then quickly looked away. Oh, those, just some old barns, nothing important. But the way he said it made Maya think they were very important indeed. Just another piece of the puzzle that was Thomas Walsh. Maya was humming as she dusted the living room, something she found herself doing more and more these days. 6 weeks at the farm had changed her in ways she was still discovering. She felt stronger, both physically and mentally. The constant walking around the property and helping with farm work had made her feel healthier than she had in years. But more than that, she felt like she mattered. Thomas had gone into town for what he said would be a quick trip to the feed store, but that was 3 hours ago. Maya wasn't worried, though. She had learned that quick trips in farming often turned into long conversations with neighbors and fellow farmers. She was reaching to dust a high shelf when she accidentally knocked over a stack of mail that Thomas had left on the side table. Papers scattered across the floor and Maya knelt down to gather them up. Most looked like regular bills and letters, but one envelope caught her attention. It was thick, expensive-looking paper with Walsh Agricultural Holdings, Inc. printed in elegant letters at the top. Below that was an address in Chicago. Maya stared at it, confused. She was about to put it back with the other mail when she noticed it was already open. She knew she shouldn't look. It was Thomas's private mail. But something about the official-looking letterhead made her curious. Almost without thinking, she pulled out the document inside. The first thing she saw was a number that made her gasp out loud. It was a quarterly report showing profits of over $12 million. $12 million. Maya had to count the zeros twice to make sure she was reading it correctly. Her hands shaking, she read further. The document was a summary of operations for Walsh Agricultural Holdings, a company that apparently owned farms across 7 different states. There were references to the Illinois properties, the Iowa acquisitions, and expansion into Nebraska markets. Maya felt like the room was spinning. She sat down hard on the couch, still holding the papers. This couldn't be right. Thomas was a small farmer who could barely make ends meet. Victoria had been very clear about that. But as Maya kept reading, the truth became impossible to ignore. Thomas Walsh wasn't just a farmer. He was the owner of one of the largest agricultural operations in the Midwest. The document mentioned partnerships with major food companies, contracts worth millions of dollars, and expansion plans that would make the business even bigger. She heard the sound of Thomas's truck pulling up outside and quickly tried to put the papers back together, but her hands were shaking so badly that she dropped them again just as Thomas walked through the front door. Hey, sorry I was gone so long. Jim Morrison caught me at the feed store and wanted to talk about... Thomas stopped mid-sentence when he saw Maya sitting on the floor surrounded by papers, her face white as a sheet. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Thomas looked at the papers, then at Maya's shocked expression, and his shoulders sagged. "You saw the report," he said quietly. Maya held up the document with a trembling hand. "Thomas, what is this? Walsh Agricultural Holdings? $12 million in quarterly profits?" Thomas closed the door behind him and leaned against it, running a hand through his hair. "I can explain." "Please do," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because according to this, you're not a poor farmer who can barely keep his farm running. You're rich. Really, really rich." Thomas walked over and sat down on the couch, careful not to sit too close to Maya. She noticed that he looked more tired than she had ever seen him. "You're right," he said simply. "I'm not poor. I haven't been poor for a long time." Maya stared at him, waiting for more explanation. "My grandfather started this farm in 1892, like the sign says. My father expanded it some, bought a few neighboring properties. But when I took over 7 years ago, I had bigger ideas." Thomas picked up one of the scattered papers and looked at it. "I started buying struggling farms, fixing them up, making them profitable again. I was good at it, really good. One farm became 5, then 10, then 50. Before I knew it, I had operations in 7 states. But why?" Maya struggled to find words. "Why do you live like this? This house, the way you dress, everything. If you're so wealthy, why live like a regular farmer?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Because I am a regular farmer, Maya. At least that's who I want to be. All that other stuff, the business side, the money, it's just a means to an end. I don't understand. When I was growing up, this farm was everything to my family. We weren't rich, but we were happy. We worked hard. We took care of the land. We were part of a community. When I started expanding the business, I promised myself I would never lose sight of that." Thomas gestured around the living room. "This house has been in my family for 4 generations. I could build a mansion somewhere, but why? This place has everything I need." Maya was starting to understand, but she still felt confused and a little hurt. "But you lied to me. You let me think you were struggling financially." "I never lied to you," Thomas said gently. "I just didn't tell you the whole truth. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Thomas, my stepmother told me you were poor. She said you could barely afford to keep your farm running. She made it sound like you were desperate enough to marry anyone." Thomas's expression darkened. "Your stepmother told you that?" "Yes. She said you weren't in a position to be picky about a wife." "Maya, that's not what happened at all." Thomas turned to face her fully. "Your stepmother never told me anything about your financial situation or mine. She contacted me through a lawyer, someone who handles business for several of my properties. She said she had a stepdaughter who was looking for a quiet life away from the city." Maya felt her anger building. "That's not what she told me. She told me you were unhappy with your current living situation and wanted to try farm life. She mentioned that you were intelligent and capable, but felt out of place in high society. She made it sound like this was something you wanted. She made it sound like I was being punished," Maya said bitterly. Thomas reached out like he wanted to take her hand, then stopped himself. "Maya, I agreed to meet you because of what she told me about your character. She said you were kind, that you volunteered at charities, that you cared more about helping people than about fancy clothes and parties." Maya looked up at him in surprise. "She said that?" "She did. And that's what made me interested in meeting you. Not because I was desperate, but because you sounded like the kind of person I could actually build a life with." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "But why didn't you tell me the truth about your business? All these weeks, I've been trying to help you improve your farm, thinking you needed the money." "You have been helping me," Thomas said earnestly. "Maya, those improvements you suggested? They're not just working here, I've been implementing them across all my properties. Your ideas are going to increase productivity on 50 farms across 7 states." Maya stared at him. "What?" "Those reports you've been helping me write up? I've been sending them to my farm managers everywhere. Your irrigation idea alone is going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars in water costs this year." Maya felt overwhelmed. "I had no idea." "I wanted to tell you," Thomas said. But I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that if you knew how much money I had, you'd think that's why I married you. Or worse, that you'd think I expected something from you because of it. Thomas stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the fields. Maya, I've had people try to get close to me. Because of money before. People who pretended to care about me but really just wanted what I could give them. When I met you, you treated me like a regular person. You cared about the farm, about the animals, about making things better. Not because you thought you'd get rich, but because that's who you are. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I still don't understand why you agreed to marry me sight unseen. Thomas turned back to her. Because your stepmother sent me a photo. She what? It was a picture of you at some charity event helping serve food to homeless people. You were smiling, really smiling, while you handed a plate to an old man. You looked so genuinely happy to be helping. That's when I knew I wanted to meet you. Maya remembered that day. It was one of the few times Victoria had let her volunteer anywhere, and only because it made the family look good. I thought you agreed to marry me because you couldn't find anyone else, Maya said quietly. Maya, look at me. She met his eyes. I could have married anyone I wanted if money was all that mattered. Rich men in America don't have trouble finding wives, trust me. I chose you because I thought we might actually make each other happy. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. All these weeks she had thought Thomas was settling for her, making the best of a bad situation. But what if that wasn't true at all? My stepmother really didn't know about your money, she asked. Not a clue. The lawyer I worked with didn't mention my net worth, just that I owned a farm and was looking for a wife. If your stepmother had known the truth, do you think she would have sent you away? Maya almost laughed despite everything. Are you kidding? She would have kept me locked in my room until she could figure out how to marry you herself. Exactly. So in a way, her cruelty gave us something she never intended to give us. What's that? A chance to get to know each other as real people, without money complicating everything. Maya looked around the living room, seeing it with new eyes. The furniture that she had thought was all Thomas could afford was actually expensive, well-made, pieces chosen for comfort rather than show. The house that seemed modest was actually perfectly maintained and filled with everything anyone could want. So what happens now? Maya asked. Thomas came back and sat down beside her, closer this time. That's up to you. Now that you know the truth, you get to decide what you want our relationship to be. Maya looked at this man who had been kinder to her than anyone in her family ever had, who had valued her ideas and made her feel useful, who had apparently been rich all along but had treated her as an equal partner rather than someone he was doing a favor for. I need some time to think, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Maya went upstairs to her room, her mind was spinning with everything she had learned. Thomas wasn't who she thought he was, but then again, maybe she wasn't who she thought she was either. For the first time in her life, she had choices to make, real choices, and whatever she decided would be up to her alone. Maya spent 2 days thinking about everything Thomas had told her. She walked the fields, sat by the pond behind the house, and tried to sort through all her feelings. The anger at Victoria for lying to both of them, the confusion about Thomas keeping his wealth secret, but mostly, she thought about what she wanted her life to look like. On the third morning, she found Thomas in the barn checking on a cow that had been sick. He looked up when she walked in, and she could see the worry in his eyes. How is she doing? Maya asked, nodding toward the cow. Better. The medicine is working. Thomas straightened up, watching Maya carefully. How are you doing? I've been thinking a lot. I figured you might be. Maya took a deep breath. I want to stay, Thomas, but I have some conditions. Relief washed over Thomas's face. Whatever you need. First, no more secrets. If we're going to make this work, we need to be honest with each other about everything. Agreed. Completely. Second, I want to be a real partner in the business, not just someone who helps around the farm. I want to learn everything about how your company works. Thomas smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. You have ideas that could revolutionize how we do things. And third, Maya said, her voice getting stronger, I want to use some of our resources to help other people who are in situations like mine was. People who've been told they're worthless when they're not. I think that's a wonderful idea. Maya felt the last of her doubts fade away. Then yes, I want to stay. I want to build a life with you. Thomas stepped closer to her. Maya, can I tell you something? Of course. These past 2 months have been the happiest I've ever been. Not because of what you've done for the farm, though. That's been amazing. But because of who you are. You make everything better just by being here. Maya felt tears in her eyes, but they were good tears. You've given me something I never thought I'd have. What's that? A place where I belong, where I matter. Thomas reached out and took her hand. You've always mattered, Maya. Some people were just too blind to see it. That afternoon, Maya and Thomas sat down together and looked at the business reports properly for the first time. Maya was amazed by the scope of what Thomas had built. His company employed over 300 people across all the farms and was growing every year. I want to show you something, Thomas said, pulling up a presentation on his computer. This is a plan I've been working on for a while, but I wasn't sure if it would work. The presentation was titled Sustainable Farming Initiative. As Thomas clicked through the slides, Maya saw a plan to convert all of his farms to more environmentally friendly practices. This would cost millions to implement, Maya said, studying the numbers. Yes, but it would pay for itself within 5 years. And more importantly, it would be better for the land and the communities where we operate. Maya looked at Thomas with new respect. You really care about more than just making money. Money is just a tool, Maya. What matters is what you do with it. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through the plans, and Maya found herself suggesting improvements and asking questions that Thomas clearly hadn't thought of. By the end of the day, they had outlined a completely revised approach that would be both more effective and less expensive. We make a good team, Thomas said as they finally closed the laptop. We do, Maya agreed. 2 weeks later, Maya got a phone call that she had been expecting but dreading. Victoria's voice came through. The phone, sweet as honey, but with an edge that Maya recognized immediately. Maya, darling, how are you doing on that little far? I'm doing very well, Victoria. What do you want? Well, I've heard some interesting rumors, something about your husband being more successful than we originally thought. Maya almost smiled. News traveled fast in small towns, and it had probably taken exactly this long for word to reach Victoria's social circles. Thomas does well for himself, Maya said carefully. I'm sure he does. Listen, dear, I've been thinking. Maybe we were too hasty in sending you away. Perhaps you'd like to come home for a visit. Bring Thomas, of course. I'd love to meet him properly. Maya could practically hear the wheels turning in Victoria's head. No doubt she was already planning how to get her hands on Thomas's money. That's very kind of you, Victoria, but I'm quite happy where I am. Victoria's voice got sharper. Maya, don't be silly. You can't possibly want to stay on some dirty farm when you could come back to civilization. Think about your future. I am thinking about my future. And it's here. Don't be ridiculous. You're my stepdaughter. Your place is with your family. Maya felt a surge of anger. My family? Victoria, you made it very clear that I wasn't part of your family when you shipped me off as punishment. I'm not coming back. Now you listen to me, young lady. Maya hung up the phone. Thomas, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, walked over and put his arms around her. You okay? I'm perfect, Maya said, and she meant it. Victoria called 3 more times that week, each time more desperate and angry. She even threatened to contest Maya's inheritance, claiming that Maya hadn't really gotten married properly. Maya just laughed. Let her contest it, Maya told Thomas. I don't need her money anymore. What about Luna and Grace? What about them? They made their choices, and I've made mine. Maya was surprised by how little she cared about Victoria's threats. The woman who had seemed so powerful and frightening just 3 months ago now seemed small and petty. A month later, Maya implemented her first major initiative. She had convinced Thomas to partner with several local organizations to create a program that provided job training and employment opportunities for people who had been overlooked by other employers, people who were overweight or older or who had been out of work for a long time. Everyone deserves a chance to prove what they can do, Maya explained to the local newspaper reporter who came to cover the story. Sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. The program was a huge success. Within 6 months, they had placed over 50 people in good jobs, and many of them were thriving in ways they never had before. Maya also started a support group for young people dealing with family rejection and self-esteem issues. Meeting once a week in the community center, she shared her own story and helped others realize that other people's opinions didn't define their worth. "I spent years believing I was worthless because that's what people told me," she said to the group one evening. "But worth isn't something other people get to decide for you. It's something you discover for yourself." 1 year after arriving at the farm, Maya and Thomas had a proper wedding ceremony. This time it was their choice, a celebration of the love and partnership they had built together. The whole community came, including many of the people Maya had helped through her programs. Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store gave a speech at the reception. When Maya first came to town, some folks wondered if she'd fit in. "Well, I think it's safe to say that we're the ones who are lucky to have her." As Maya looked around at all the faces of people who had become her friends and family, she thought about how different her life was from what she had expected a year ago. She was still the same person physically, but everything else had changed. She felt strong, confident, and valuable. Thomas appeared beside her, looking handsome in his suit. "Any regrets?" he asked with a smile. Maya looked at him, then at their friends celebrating around them, then at the ring on her finger that now meant something real. "Just one," she said. Thomas looked worried. "What's that?" "I regret that it took so long for me to realize what I was capable of." Thomas pulled her into his arms. "Well, we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." As they danced together under the stars, Maya thought about Victoria and Luna and Grace, probably sitting in their big empty house, still trying to impress people who didn't really care about them. She felt sorry for them, but she didn't miss them at all. Maya had learned something important over the past year. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. Victoria thought she was punishing Maya by sending her away, but instead she had given her the chance to discover who she really was. And who Maya really was turned out to be someone pretty amazing. The woman who had once thought she was worthless was now helping other people discover their own worth. The girl who had been told she was unmarriageable had found a love deeper than anything she could have imagined. The person who had felt like a burden had become someone whose ideas were changing the lives of hundreds of people. Maya had finally found her place in the world, and it was better than anything she could have dreamed of.